You're listening to a podcast from thespoilist.com. Cyberspace, the new frontier. These are the voyages of the podcast First Contact. Its mission? To explore every episode of Star Trek The Next Generation. To seek out new viewers and have new conversations. To boldly view what many have viewed before. You're listening to First Contact, the Star Trek The Next Generation intro cast, where two Star Trek fans guide a naive young man through the many adventures of the Enterprise D. I'm Andrew.
I'm James.
And I'm Alex.
This week we are watching Q Who. It was written by our very special friend Maurice Hurley and directed by Rob Bowman. It first aired the week of May the 8th, 1989. James, what happens in this episode?
Q arrives on the Enterprise, revealing he's been ousted by the Continuum and asked to join the crew. After Picard rejects his offer, Q sends the ship 7,000 light years away. There they encounter the Borg, a lifeform enhanced with cybernetic implants, who function as a collective. The Borg fire on the Enterprise, killing 18 crew members. The Enterprise attempts to outrun their ship, but it seems unstoppable. Picard is forced to beg Q to end the encounter, which he does. The Enterprise returns to the Alpha Quadrant, shaken, humbled, and in fear of a new threat to their way of life.
Well, that wasn't a very funny synopsis, was it? That's not funny at all.
This really could have done with a B-plot in which Wesley loses his jumper or something.
Before we get into the episode, and I know we had a similar discussion last week, but I want to talk about this episode title. Q Who. Now, Q is in this episode. Let's not dispute that. It's definitely a Q episode. Q Who? What's that got to do with anything? Maybe it's an episode about Q losing his memory and not knowing who he is and just appearing on the Enterprise, or maybe it's an episode where Q shouts cute greetings at Picard.
Yoo-hoo!
It was originally a much camper episode. The original casting of Kenneth Williams, however, fell through when they realised that he died some years beforehand.
You've watched the episode now. Can anyone tell me why it's called Q Who, other than the fact that Who rhymes with Q? We did have that episode before, Hide and Q, which made no sense. I mean, this one at least sort of is a pun and a rhyme.
Is it a pun, though? It's only a pun if they mean you-who.
Which I thought they did.
Well, why would they mean that?
They turn up to the Borg cube. Yoo-hoo!
Why is it called Q Who? Does anyone have a decent theory on this?
Because they're wondering who the Borg are.
I've seen one suggestion that because the Borg are a bit like the Cybermen from Doctor Who, it's a reference to Doctor Who. The other way the title may make sense is if we're trying to say, oh, does Q actually want to help them? So who is he really?
Oh, that's quite interesting, but I don't think that they were that smart.
No.
Anyway, that aside, Alex, what did you think of this episode?
Well, I think on paper, it should be a steaming heap of shit. Because, really, there's not a great deal that happens. It starts off being a Q episode, that then suddenly stops in exactly the same way that it did in Encounter at Farpoint, where we were critical of that happening. And then they find a threat, and then they run away from it. It doesn't sound great, but it's very entertaining.
I'm so glad you said that. We've been critical of some of the things Maurice Hurley has done in the past, but here he proves, I think, that he's a very good writer. As you say, on paper, not a lot happens, but very atmospheric, very interesting. Some really interesting direction as well. the appearance of Q, I think, great corridor shot, a tracking shot following Picard going into the turbo lift, and then onto the shuttlecraft. Really visually interesting, something we've not seen before. I thought that was great.
Yeah, and as well as being visually interesting, it's got to be one of the more entertaining cold opens that we've had in a while. I mean, we've had some really terrible cold opens. I can't remember which episode it was. Was it Elementary Dear Data? Where basically nothing happened in the cold open. They just sort of went, well, we'll go to the holodeck. Dun, 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 dun.
We have skipped a bit. I mean, it does open with new Ensign Sonia Gomez ordering her hot chocolate. That's fine, I don't mind a bit of character interaction and engineering. We get to see something in engineering, which is great. Why would they even have a food replicator there? It doesn't seem very helpful. Do you think you should have these around the panels? I don't know, the whole ship's made of these panels. Does it make any difference where I have my hot chocolate?
Oh, I'm sorry, of course I shouldn't be drinking my hot chocolate here. It's totally irresponsible. I'll just stand 3 feet over there, in front of this door.
Now, Gomez was originally introduced because they thought she might be a love interest for Geordi. And she goes on to appear one more time.
But Geordi's gay.
They actually did want to make him gay at the start, but I guess they thought, well, he's already blind. It might confuse the audience.
Are you suggesting that the writers, in their wisdom, thought that by having Geordi be blind, he might just be confused because he can't see people?
It might be a little troubling to have one guy who is black, gay, and blind. It's like, hey, well, we want to represent minorities. Let's roll them all into one character.
Well, to be fair, with all the characters, you can't have too much. We've got a captain who's bald and French, apparently. You can't do anything. You can't do anything else with the character. You're taking it too far if you add something on top of that. So Geordi, he's blind. He's black. He can't be gay on top of that.
Every character can only have 2 defining traits, you mean?
You do get the feeling that the season 1 writers would have thought that.
I think, given the time it takes her to spill her hot chocolate over Picard, it should have burned him. That's bad hot chocolate. It's not hot enough, if you ask me. I want it to be just a little too hot when I get it, so I can warm my hands on it and let it cool down as I drink it. But no, he seems fine with the hot chocolate being spilt over him. As always, we're dwelling on the important things.
And then she rubs it all in.
She rubs it all in, just pushes that boiling liquid against his skin. But he's so stoic, he won't mention it, Anyway, we go to 10 forward, where Geordi and Ensign Gomez are having a sort of pep talk. Maybe it's a date. Who knows?
Well, it can't be a date because Geordi's gay. Oh no, he's blind. Sorry, I keep getting his characteristics mixed up.
Is Geordi blind?
No, he's gay.
No, he's black.
Can he play the trombone?
He's French as well, apparently.
Oh, I don't remember that. Does he have a beard? Is Ensign Gomez's beard?
He's an android.
What an interesting character, though. This mechanical, blind, black, gay Frenchman. The way that his bald head complements his black, curly hair is just phenomenal. You gotta hand it to the writers.
Oh, God. Yeah. So, Guinan, it turns out, is not just a bartender, but she has superpowers, and she senses that something's wrong. Even messaging the bridge to say, is something wrong? To which they say, no, I don't think so. But, yeah, what do you think of these developments in Guinan? You're not just going to give a great actress like Whoopi Goldberg a bartender role. She's got to have some kind of character arc and mystery.
She's got to be a bartender with a history that we don't explain. Yeah.
Yeah.
She's still serving drinks. She's just pretending to be a tiger as well.
Q is clearly threatened by Guinan in this episode. I mean, she's never really shown magic tricks, although she does do some kind of kung fu pose. Is that what she's going for? It doesn't really look terribly effective. It's quite comical.
You never get the feeling that Guinan has those sort of powers, except for that one small scene. She always just seems to be kind of an ageless alien. That's all. Not some weird Q-type alien.
Well, that's because she's benign, you know. She's got her own prime directive, complete policy of non-interference.
Except she does interfere with Earth before they make first contact with the Vulcans.
Well, yes, but that's all for the future. Who knows which way Time's arrow will point.
That's the name of the episode.
That was a joke I was making.
I know, and I was explaining it because jokes are always funnier when you explain them.
They are much better when explained. So the shuttle's missing. There's a missing shuttle. They really have to sort out their checkout system for shuttles. Far too easy for them to be stolen by teenagers or godlike beings. The revelation that Q's been kicked out of the continuum, that's I don't know what purpose that serves particularly in the episode, other than him to say, I want to join the ship, and if I don't get my way, I'll do something bad.
I think that is it, yeah.
I think maybe, because I'm looking back at this having seen future Q episodes, I kind of feel like Q is being sincere when he says he wants to join the crew.
Picard denies Q's request to join the crew of the Enterprise, and so he sends them 7,000 light years across space, and it'll take them 2 years to get back to where they were. Now, as I recall, I might be wrong, Voyager got sent 70,000 light years across space.
Right, I can explain this. They couldn't take a straight route back, and the Enterprise is faster.
It was going to take them 70 years to get back, so it's okay. There's a continuity reason for that.
If you look at Voyager's route back home, which I think they have in season 1, it's very twisty.
Oh man, I think that's just because Janeway's quite incompetent and doesn't know how to work the navigation.
Why would you have to have a twisty route through space?
Because there's nebulas.
There's really big nebulas. That is neither here nor there. So they're 2 years away, which is where the Borg are, and they encounter the Borg, a big cube ship. That's an interesting design. That's something completely new. This is Star Trek The Next Generation. We're not relying on anything old from Star Trek of days of yore. This is new, and I like it.
Does make me think slightly of that Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy film, though, where the Vogons' comedic ships are just big pillars, because why would they bother putting in curves or anything?
Look, it's functional. It's very functional.
It's easily stackable.
You know what it does make me think? A better title for this episode would have been Q Cubed. So they could have actually used the title that they eventually use in Voyager for an episode in which there's another Q. So let's call it Q Cubed for some reason.
Interestingly enough, we said in season 1 the binars, which were using cybernetic technology, that was something quite new. We liked that, using some ideas of the time. That was interesting. We also liked the aliens from Conspiracy, which were using a hive mind to try and control the Federation. So we've almost combined those two elements into this new alien race, the Borg. What are your first impressions of the Borg, Alex? I know you've never seen this before.
Well, they're quite cheap looking, aren't they?
They're quite distinct. Let's remember, this is 1989.
That's where Wesley's jumper went.
Yeah, it does look like a jumper with bits stuck on, I'll admit, but it is different from the usual kind of let's stick a nose ridge or a head ridge on a human and make them look different. They have an overall aesthetic, from the ships to the individuals to their modules. I think a lot of thought has gone into the design.
But I don't quite understand how they found it so hard to cover the entire thing. Because it had... We can see the jumper. And that is the thing that makes it look like a costume. And they did a simulant in Red Dwarf 10. And when they did it then, it looks very similar to the Borg. They said in the documentary when they were making that it was just pieced together with random things they found and some silver makeup. Why couldn't they do that here?
It is, basically, isn't it? It's just a hodgepodge of just bits. And that's fine. I don't really have an issue with that. I may be being a little over harsh, but there's something about that white makeup with the fairly... It's almost standardised, kind of. Even though each one's different, the way that bits are just sort of randomly added on, yeah, it just gives it a slightly cheap air here. Now, I've seen photos and things of Borgs from other episodes and Voyager and whatnot. I am aware this is done better later. It's just here, the costumes are a little bit iffy. And what on earth is with that big arm with the bit on the end that just, as far as I can tell, its main purpose is just to wiggle about a bit.
I guess it is just to set up the idea in the mind of the audience that these are people that have got robot bits on them. What does a robot do? Well, it wiggles up and down in a loud mechanical way. That's robot for you.
These are people with robot bits on. You wouldn't have that on the Enterprise, though. No character would have cybernetic implants on any part of them. You only have gay characters on Enterprise. You don't have cybernetic implants. That's too much.
You wouldn't have an artificial heart. You wouldn't have artificial eyes. Nothing like that. That's silly. They don't do that in the Federation. But did you find them scary? I guess there's an element of the zombie about the Borg. They walk quite slowly but purposefully, ignoring you until they decide to eat your flesh.
Yeah, I mean there is a very strong zombie element with the whole silent thing and whatnot as well. And yeah, there's parallels with the Cybermen. I mean, very obvious parallels with the Cybermen.
Well, to be fair, it was something done before Doctor Who as well.
The really interesting element for me that is done on other things occasionally, but you don't see it too much, and for one good reason I'll get to in a minute, is the idea of adapting. So you have one Borg shot dead with the phaser, so another one comes in and immediately preempts that and has a shield in place for it. Now that makes them quite a terrifying villain and a difficult adversary. The obvious problem with that, and the problem why you don't have many shows doing it, is you're then making the undefeatable villain.
Yes, and then you have to come up with a way to make the undefeatable villain defeatable, and it gets silly.
Precisely. Which is why having them run away in this episode, actually, when it should have been something that we criticised heavily, worked here.
It's a way of making sure they escape to have more adventures, but clearly defining that they have no way of combating this. They are beaten all hands down. There's nothing they can do other than rely on outside forces to save them.
No, it's a taster of what's to come, basically. And in that respect, it works very well. And they managed to cover the whole running away thing by making it an episode where Picard and the crew at large, I suppose, have to deal with their own hubris.
That's quite interesting, and I'm surprised the writers have raised this. You know, almost the smugness of the Federation, the complacency that they've said in the past, oh, we're not the universe's policemen, but I think it's been demonstrated that's exactly how they view themselves. They are almost above. They go around spouting ancient Chinese philosophy and laugh at the inferior races with their poor technology. And now they're encountering something that is a total threat to their way of life. And, you know, the suggestion that up till now they have been quite arrogant, I quite like that. It is pointing out a weakness which, you know, humans aren't supposed to have in Gene Roddenberry's perfect future.
Yeah, and it just goes to show why the show is better when Gene didn't have a big influence. But that kind of introspective thing, I think that's essential, really, in something like this, the further you get into it. I mean, it's something that in recent years Doctor Who's been very good at dealing with, especially at the moment with Series 8 dealing with all of these actions, well, does this make your main character a good man or not with the decisions that you're trying to make? Occasionally you have to do it. And pairing this with that, little prequel for what's coming later, it's a really good combination and stops something that should be terrible on paper from being so and makes it entertaining.
You said it's entertaining, but would you rank it, even now, as you're not that many episodes into Next Generation, would you rank it as the best? Or would you rank it as one of the best?
I wouldn't say it's the best, because I think entertaining is different from completely satisfying. There are clearly shows that work better as a whole, but I don't think that just to be entertaining is a great criticism. If you can really enjoy however long it works out, is it about 45, 50 minutes worth of television, then that's equally acceptable. But I would put this up as one of the episodes out of everything we've watched so far that I'd be most likely to go back and watch again.
It is a great episode, but when I was watching it, I was thinking, this is considered one of the best of Star Trek The Next Generation, of all of it. And I was thinking, well, it is maybe of Season 1 and 2, but it's not in the same ballpark as The Measure of a Man. And it's certainly nowhere near the best Q episode.
I would have to say I enjoy this more than The Measure of a Man. I would watch this again, actually, right now. Comparing it, we very recently watched Pen Pals, the last episode, and watching that was a real slog. And, 10 minutes in, I was so horribly bored. This, all the way through, gripped, don't want to stop it. Keep watching all the way through, want to see what happens next. Very entertaining. And there's no doubting, Measure of a Man, a quality piece of writing. But I think this does more with the televisual form. That is standing in a room talking. It's a play, essentially. This does more with special effects, it does more with character, I would say, and to the overall picture of the universe of the TV show. I think it's more significant in that way. It's a game changer, essentially, and I think it does everything it needs to very well.
What we're saying, basically, is that sometimes when you're just sat down with a pizza and a beer, you want to watch Rambo, not Waiting for Godot.
That's exactly it. But I think this is fairly intelligent. It does comment on the arrogance of the crew. It does make them vulnerable for once, which is something we've been waiting for. The one thing I would say, do you think they've waited too long to introduce this threat? I mean, obviously, in the early days, the Ferengi were supposed to be the big bads. They've had to rethink that completely, because that was clearly stupid. So we're introducing the Borg. But towards the end of Season 2, we first sort of had hints of them. The neutral zone gets mentioned, and the outpost getting destroyed, so we've had hints of the Borg, and that's readdressed here to confirm that's what it was, but it's taken them a long time getting there.
Well, the writer's strike has been kind of blamed for the reason that this episode happened so late on, hasn't it?
I don't have a great problem with it appearing this late. What I have a problem with is that it's not seeded early enough. Because you have that thing with the neutral zone, but there should have been more. It should have been seeded like a big arc, with these little clues here and there and whatnot.
I think we saw the beginnings of that, but as I said, the writer's strike kind of scuppered all the plans, and we ended up with the child.
And actually, Maurice Hurley, who we've blamed for poor writing because he's the showrunner, it seems like he has been hampered by Gene Roddenberry as well. He did want to do 3-part episodes and introduce the Borg at the tail end of Season 1 and a 3-part episode starting Season 2. Who knows how it would have gone had there not been a writer's strike. But they're his creation, and I think, particularly in this episode, and that's all we've got to go on, that's all we can really comment on in this form of podcast, incredibly effective, and you want to see more of them, I would say.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's also quite rare in what we've seen so far, for the threat to be there right up until the end. In this episode, you don't know how they're going to get out of it. There's the thing of Q could send them back, but you're never entirely sure if that's the way they're going to go with it or not, I would say, right up until that last scene before they're sent back. And God, we've needed that for a long time. You know, just the uncertainty of what's to come next. And it's written really well, actually. The starting with the Q thing and then having that develop so that you find the cube, the mystery of the cube, going aboard the cube, all of that building up. The tension rises steadily until you get to that chase. And yeah, it builds perfectly up until that chase.
Well, Alex, do you still find, because you've only, this is your third Q episode now, so when he arrived, did you think that you were going to get a comedy episode, or did you think that the crew were going to be threatened by Q?
Threatened, because the Q ones haven't really been comedy.
John Delancey, he's giving quite an overblown, in some ways camp performance, but Encounter at Farpoint, he was very effective because he was threatening. I think that the silly stuff is maybe okay because he's a good performer, he's an interesting performer. When he's on screen, you really want to watch him, but when he's being scary, yeah, that really works. I like that. I believe that people would be scared of him when he's acting like a psychopath.
I just wonder if maybe me and Andrew are... Maybe we have a different perspective on Q in this episode because we've seen all of the Next Generation episodes and all of the Voyager episodes and that Deep Space Nine episode with him.
Oh, well, actually, let's talk about that. What do you think of Q in this episode? It's quite interesting. Is he actually... is he just angry at the crew, or was that an excuse? Was he actually trying to warn them that their future is potentially dangerous, that there's this threat on the way and he's giving them time to prepare? What do you think is actually going on in the motivation, or do you think it's all just sort of scripted as plot devices to get the crew from point A to point B?
Well, realistically, it could very much be that, but it comes across as Q almost bored, trying to have fun, because he knows that they're never going to accept him onto the Enterprise, and so uses that as his excuse to send them to meet the Borg. Not as a warning, but just as a way of playing with them, really. He always comes across as that sort of typical devilish, impish character that's there to cause trouble.
And trouble he doth cause. We talked a bit about the Borg on the Enterprise, but the away team going onto the Borg ship. Now, what did you think of that in terms of production design? For me, and I would actually say this is a general problem in Star Trek Next Generation, a little too brightly lit, a bit more dark and dingy. We talk about, you know, a lot of like derelict shots in Red Dwarf. They managed to get dark and dingy down. They don't seem to be able to do that on American TV so well.
No, it needs a better lighting director. Although perhaps it's not the lighting director so much as the culture of television at the time. I think you're probably right.
Well, to be fair, most of the Borg are one-eyed, so they're going to need a lot of lighting to see around the ship.
That said, I thought the design, for the most part, was pretty good. You've got to love it. A grated floor always makes a difference. Always makes it look much more like a ship than just having the studio floor painted. At first I did genuinely think that, like Red Dwarf, they were filming up on the lighting gantries at first, and then you realise that no, they've basically just got a gantry on the floor. But it works. It gives it that industrial ship feeling. I would say it didn't work so well in other rooms. The minute that you got into a room which did just have the studio floor painted, it did just look like a set with some walls up. There was no way around that. But the other part, the corridor with all of them lined up against the wall, that was very good. And using the glass plate shot, which I'm assuming it was a glass plate shot, to give the sense of scale, again, that worked very well. A good bit of building tension.
Yeah, absolutely. I suppose the other major room is the Borg nursery. I would say, personally, perhaps a misstep in there. You know, if you put a little Borg outfit on a baby, it's going to look cute.
Yeah, that wasn't the greatest, was it? I mean, so they're essentially suggesting they take babies at birth and then implant the cybernetics. The only thing is, they sort of presented that as the Borg give birth.
Yeah, they did, but I suppose both we and the writers are learning about the Borg. I mean, was there any hint of assimilation here? Sorry to spoil this, but you're culturally aware of the Borg, right?
Yes.
As a general person, and you know, you will be assimilated, resistance is futile. That's not really in place. Their catchphrases aren't. But yeah, the implication here is the Borg reproduce as biological life forms and then start adding bits.
Which is less threatening, actually. But they get away with it because there's still a mystery in this episode. Had they continued in that vein, it wouldn't have been as interesting, I don't think. There's something fundamentally appealing about that sort of body horror aspect. It's why the Cybermen work so well in Doctor Who.
I should probably kind of say I do really like this episode. I'm not trying to be horribly mean about it, but I just watching it, I was thinking, I'm currently watching through season 4, and I'm going to watch through season 5 as well because I've just got them on Blu-ray, and I'm watching episodes, and I'm thinking there's an episode every 3 episodes which are better than Q Who. It's only one of the greatest when you compare it to the not so good episodes either side.
Up until now, within its context, this is a superb episode, and one you wouldn't have imagined possible during season 1.
Absolutely. Measure of a Man, The Royale, and Q Who are the best episodes up to now. And I know I'm probably the only person who puts The Royale in that list.
So, summing up, good new enemy, good writing, good direction, interesting performances, pretty decent special effects. Overall, we give this 9 warp factors.
Quickfire.
Why, if they're up against their greatest adversary yet and they need to get away as quickly as possible, why do they leave at warp 8?
Oh, you don't want to burn out the engines, do you?
I would say if ever you were going to risk burning out the engines, this seems like a pretty good time.
Ron Jones wrote the score for this episode. I don't often notice the score, except when it's bad, but I thought it was really good in this episode. Very atmospheric, very science fiction-y, a bit different, less orchestral, a little more electro, which was appropriate. He also wrote the score for The Neutral Zone, where the Borg were first mentioned.
Pulaski does not appear in this episode.
Neither does Tasha Yar. Well, considering we are talking about an episode that he wrote, it's time for us to hear the sacred words of Maurice Hurley.
Whoa. No. We've been getting complaints about this. There's a lot of people saying that we are being very unfair to Maurice Hurley with the silly voices that you are doing.
Oh.
Yeah, I'm sorry, we can't continue like this. I realise it's not necessarily intentional, given that none of the three of us know what Maurice Hurley sounds like, and I know that we could very easily just go to YouTube and look it up and find out, but that would take some degree of effort for all of 30 seconds, and it's just not been worth it. So, this time, let's not do it this way. I'll do it.
These are the words of Maurice Hurley.
I thought it was really great. It was an attempt to create some new jeopardy, a new villain. You have to have an adversary that's worthy, so you really need to make it impossible to defeat them. What we really wanted to do, but we couldn't do because of money, was insects. Insects, because mentality is great, because it is relentless. They don't care, they have no mercy. No feelings towards you. They have their own agenda and that is it. If all of them die getting there, you don't really care. If you want some biddies, there you go.
And now for a feature long thought to be dead. It's 10 better puns involving Q. What did you do last time? Not laugh. At 10, down 5 places but still holding on in there, it's Q, the Funky Gibbon. At 9, a classic making a return to the charts. Hi Q! At 8, it's the Bond theme you all love, a Q to a kill. 7, it's that one from those adverts you really like. Bird's Eye Q. Is there someone at the door at 6? Knock knock, Q's there. At 5, it's Q Laurie. Didn't expect to see him here. At 4, what can it be? Give us a Q. Now to that all-important top 3. New entry in at 3 with coupons. What's at number 2? Q knows. And at number 1 for the 10th consecutive week, it's Q Cubed Q. Well, another day, another episode done. We'll be back very soon talking about Samaritan Snare. But for now, goodbye.
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 You're not Maurice Hurley now.
Oh. That's what you think.
James, what happens in this episode?
Q arrives on the Enterprise, revealing he's been ousted by the Continuum and asked to join the Q. The Q? I'm making more Q puns.
You're making coupons?
No, you've just made one coupons.
Coupons is good. That's a good one.
Put
it
in
on
file.
the list.
Your pun will also go on the list.
I'll start again.